afternoon. It's great to be back here again, and it's great to be here with such a cool lineup. So, again, my name is Nick Meyer. You see our esteemed panelists' names and titles behind, so we have agreed that we're not going to do a long introduction and jump right into it, right? So, in this session, we want to take a look a little bit at how difficult it must be to allocate generous but limited resources into a region and a hospitality world that has so many segments, so many target markets, so many sub-segments, so many specialization and niches, that it sometimes can become almost overwhelming to decide where you allocate that. So I'm going to kick in that a little bit today by first of all looking a little bit at the geographies, but also at the, let's call them themes, segments, or experiences that each of our esteemed panelists is pursuing with their company. And just they will talk about their companies themselves, but what I really like about the way that Jonathan has curated this panel is we're seeing 4 undisputed, I would say, national champions in their markets and doing what they have chosen to do. So, Jumeirah, thank you very much, by the way. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Also, thank you from my kids for the Jumeirah Beach Hotel. Hyatt, what we agreed we were going to call the Taj Group today, and Ascot. So basically, 4 countries that we look at a lot: India, US, Europe, Singapore, and UAE. 4 very strong products, different products, very strong, and you guys all have to decide where to go next. So, Alex, where are we going next, and how are you thinking about that?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the session this afternoon. I sit and look at this question, Nicholas, from quite a unique position because I have a dual role at Jumeirah. I have a role to be Chief Commercial Officer for the organization, and I also have a role to lead our development function under the overall title of Chief Growth Officer.
So you live by the consequences of your decisions.
Exactly. So before we even start a conversation around where do we go, I'm already thinking about how do we make this the most successful commercial operation possible and make the best returns for our partner or owner investor. And so it also gives me a chance to look at a great spectrum of data and sort of see, what are our customers telling us? What are the trends that we're seeing in our existing products that we have today across the world, not just here in the UAE, but in all of the locations that we have Jumeirah properties from Bali to London and everything in between. And the key trend that we're really seeing is that the luxury traveler, very resilient, very successful market for us. Those core markets that have been historically the core luxury traveler markets, those 6 to 8 global markets, over the next 5 to 10 years ahead, I think are ultimately going to stay more or less the same. They're going to be buoyant, they're going to be robust, they're going to continue to grow. And we're very grateful for those markets. But actually, the power of success, I think, for us as a brand going forward is some of the more emerging luxury outbound markets. And so the focus for us and my organization, both in a development capacity and also commercially, is to really look at those interesting emerging opportunities. And so for us, we're focusing a lot more now on the South American market. We're looking at the Indian market, and we're looking at some of the Asian, particularly the Chinese markets, in more detail. And those behaviors of travel from those markets are inevitably going to be different. The way that consumers research, investigate, book, lead times, length of stay, traveler profiles are going to be very different. And so we're really excited to get into that and look at how, as we add more product to the Jumeirah brand across the globe, we're thinking about those emerging power growth markets for the future. We're also really excited to see how we can learn from those markets and look at how the localized aspect of the Jumeirah brand in each of the locations that they're going to operate in is still going to speak to the authenticity of the location, it's still going to speak to the position of luxury, and that's exactly what every customer is going to want, no matter which market they're coming from.
And one pick on something you said and play it over to you, Felicity, because when we prepared a little bit for this session, you said actually that increasingly data was influencing your decision making on how to allocate. What do you know about your visitors and your markets that you perhaps didn't know 5, 6, 7 years ago? Or in which areas do you know more about that?
Data is just a huge opportunity for us to be able to target resources in a much more precise way than we were ever able to before. The way we look at growth in Hyatt, obviously a global brand, with big presence in ASPAC and the Americas, and actually relatively small presence still in EME. But what we're doing from a strategy perspective for growth is Northern Europe is very different to what's happening, for instance, in this region. So we have very different strategies. I think broadly, though, the way we look at our brands is we have brands which, like Park Hyatt or Andaz, Thomson, The Standard, which are not going to be growth at scale brands, but are aspirational and create halo for what we see are growth at scale brands, like Hyatt Regency, for example, or Hyatt Place. And we have very different strategies in place for where we want to grow luxury, lifestyle, compared to our growth at scale brands. And a lot of what we do now is around pinpointing markets where we want to grow at scale. For example, the UK is a good example, because that will feed our resort properties in Spain. So it's very much looking about how do we keep the guest within our ecosystem, World of Hyatt being the sort of pivot for that through the loyalty program, because that has the benefit to every hotel within our ecosystem, and that's our strength, is our distribution and the clarity of our brands for our guests. As I think about growth in this specific region, obviously Saudi is a huge opportunity. We've just put a deal leader into Saudi Arabia, Brianna, who's somewhere in this room, and she will be leading the growth for Hyatt in Saudi. So we do look at markets where there are specific opportunities, and we will put resource in. I think the other way we will grow as well more now is through franchising. So we had a very proven franchising operation in the Americas. We've transplanted that into Europe. We've been successful with it. And we're now going to start to use our franchise partners to grow in the Middle East and Africa too.
So you're not just moving into new markets, but you're actually adopting new growth models basically for yourselves. Well, they're not new, but you use them maybe to a larger extent than you have used in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were slow to franchise in Europe. I think our first franchise was something like 8-9 years ago, which compared to our competitors and Marriott, Hiltons of this world, that was very late to the game. We took it slowly, deliberately. We wanted to build up the expertise of how we actually support our franchisees rather than police them. Those two things are very different. And now we've got that confidence, and we've started franchising. We have two very successful franchises in Egypt now. We will grow more with that particular owner. And I think that's one thing we like to do at Hyatt is grow with a purpose and some intent. And if we can build up a success with an owner, do multiple deals with one owner and grow with them in the markets that they know, it makes a lot of sense for us to do that.
Suma, you have one of the brands that perhaps delivers in the deepest national DNA of India, and you're very proud of that, right? And that's why we love coming to you, because you, regardless of where your hotel is, you get a connection back to those good experiences that we might have all had in India. But as you grow, is like, how do you trade off between preserving that and scaling the brand nonetheless? Because I think you told me that you were very ambitious to bring the Taj brand even further into the global competition.
So we're looking at growth slightly differently from probably every other brand or a chain is looking at. For us, we coming out of India, which is today one of the fastest growing market, for us, it is important. We are focused on India to grow. So India and Indian subcontinent is very critical for us. We operate across every segment in the Indian market with multiple brands that cater to not just the traditional segments of, mid-market, upscale, upper upscale, and luxury, but also different purpose for travel and different very experiential needs of certain niche markets. Well, in India, we even operate living palaces and palace hotels, which probably very few International chains have that kind of collection where the royalty actually stays and lives in the hotel. So it's like taking your customers back in a bygone era on how the royalty lived. So we do that. And we pride on the fact that we are custodians of Indian hospitality, which is rooted in tradition, culture. So that is what we bring to the table when we open a Taj hotel. When we look at international growth, our ambitions are huge, but they are very measured. We want to grow with our luxury brand Taj only at this stage, and we're not looking at just bombarding the market across all the segments.
But still to share, because I thought that was very interesting when we prepared, you actually have a broad brand spectrum, right? That
Yes.
you may not bring internationally, but can you just quickly give us some snapshot
So-
of what else you do? Because I really like that when you explain it.
So we, we started years ago as a single mono brand company with Taj being the luxury hotel, and it still is our iconic brand, which has been voted the world's strongest hotel brand by Brand Finance for multiple number of years. But the way we operate, our brandscape is not the traditional way of looking at hierarchy of brands, but we have multiple brands that cater to different needs of the customers. For example, we have very boutique experiential leisure brand called Tree of Life, which we launched. We are into homestays with Ama Homestays. We are into upscale brands, whether it is Gateway or Vivanta. We are into the budget mid-scale segment with Ginger. So we have an array of brands, which we have some, of course, we have reimagined the old brands, some we have launched new brands, and we have also in the recent past acquired brands. So we have an entire brandscape of at least 8 to 10 brands today. But you are asking this question of growth globally. We want to grow more with a greater regional focus. What is really driving our growth is this huge increase in India outbound. And you have, with the higher spending capability, today we see India as big source markets for the entire region, and also in this market in UAE, in Southeast Asia, where India is amongst the top 3 source markets for these destinations. So for us, our international growth, we want to be in the luxury space, and we want to be in those markets where there is huge customer crossover for us. The people who stay with us in our hotels in India travel to these locations. There is huge brand recall, and markets where there is a large Indian diaspora, where we cater to their specific needs of whether it is wellness, whether it is banqueting, weddings, family vacations. So for us, the international growth, we're looking at it from that lens. This is not to say that we are hotel only for Indians, but we bring what Indian hospitality is to the table. We are not a cookie cutter brand, and we do have standards, but what we really bring is the softer element of service from India. And therefore, our primary focus regions are Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, where we see a large cultural match, and the cultural sensitivities that we bring into our service, I think, is best suited for this market. So that's our primary focus. And having said that, we are also growing in other key gateway cities of the world, whether it is London, New York, Paris, and some of these gateway cities in Europe. So that's the entire array of brands and markets that we are looking at for growing.
Very cool. While the 3 panelists that we've heard already have very distinct brands that play very strongly in their marketing, etc., you have a very different, Serena, you have a very different approach. I mean, you have a very strong brand, you're a world-dominating player in residential living or service departments, but you have a very different growth strategy, and you've been present for a long time in very different markets. Can you tell us a little bit more how you plan your growth? So we're hearing you follow your Indian domestic tourists. We've heard about a more systemic approach. How about yourself in Ascot? How do you decide where you grow next and where you want to grow next?
So in Ascot, we play in the living sector, and more than 70% of our 1,000 property portfolio is in Asia. And so we derive a lot of data with regards to the Asian traveler and where they go to. So if you take a look at statistics, there has been a huge rise in intra-Asia travel for many reasons, and this will dictate the growth, which I will speak about later. But so a lot of data points to enhanced intra-Asia regional travel because of reasons such as ease of visa regulations, improvements in accessibility. And what this has eluded is that with this increase, we're also seeing, in addition to the transient corporate and also the transient leisure markets, we're also seeing three very distinct groups of travelers which are emerging in Asia. One of which is your solo traveler looking for community, looking at place-making properties, making to make connections. The second is your group travel or travel with friends, multi-generational travel, and therefore looking for accommodation needs whereby families and groups can come together, because Asian families like to come together and stay together, a bit like some of the travel here in the Middle East. And the third one is really interesting, is the slow travel. So time, plenty, money, plenty. It's about getting immersed into the destination and really becoming, living it as a local and learning and embracing the culture. So if you take a look at, these different trends which are emerging in Asia, it points a lot to that living sector, and that's where we play. Because what we've found is that in today's mode of travel, whether it's short, whether it's extended, whether it's long, they're all converge together. There is a blurring of lines at this point in time. And so we play in the living sector because we want to be able, across all our brands, to provide the element of stay opportunity regardless of where you go to, why you stay, and how long you stay. Now, understanding where the Asia platform is happening and where the inter-Asia regional travel is happening, and you take a look at the stats with Asia travel and investment into this part of the world, you have a sense that this is coming, that Asia travel is coming. If you take a look at the Golden Week pickup, in Middle East, it's sort of like we've seen that huge significance, right? And the Asians are looking for that different experience, whether it's entertainment, whether it's sports, it's a cultural immersion. And you see that coming here to the Middle East, and that's very clear. You also see that there is also investments which are coming in, right? So a lot of Chinese, investors have now moved away from just exploratory, but they're now setting up, permanent offices here as well. So when you see all that's happening, you see the, inroads of Asian travelers coming here, and we see the trends that's happening in Asia. That whole living sector becomes really, really interesting because it's about not just your transient stay, as I mentioned before, but also looking at solo travelers or the next generational traveler, looking at building, looking for community building, so experience that social living, which is our life brand. Also looking at residential living style elements, whereby groups of people can come together and stay together, whether it's for short term or it's long term, and that's where our service apartment brands come into play. And also with our hotel and resorts brand, but everything is now converging in a very interesting way in that living sector. And the way we see brands is not about brands being stereotyped into it's a hotel, it's a resort. We see brands basically taking on the note of it is experiences, right? And therefore allowing each brand to be able to cater to the various personas that one travels with. Whether it's a family and I want my family to stay together, in a 2-bedroom apartment, or whether it's a solo traveler coming in and wanting to meet new people and and build the community together. So I think that's where we're slightly differentiated from that whole living sector space. and learning from, our presence in Asia, learning about, the travel patterns which are happening, how we see that Asian traveler making inroads globally. Now, in Ascot, we also have a partnership with Xinjiang, and so the data points about Chinese traveler, also is, resonates with us. And when you take a look at the Asian traveler and the Asian investors, very interestingly, the recent deals that we've signed in the Middle East are with Asian money, and also with the investor wanting to bring that Asia traveler, into this part of the world and being able to create the experiences for them to be comfortable in this.
So both you and Suma, you're kind of saying, well, we're going to come with our brand, with our segments, with our home crowds, for lack of a better word, I mean that very lovingly, with our capital at times as well, and then basically build on that, attract new additional segments. That's kind of like the strategy that you both seem to be describing. How are you doing this outbound? I mean, you are perhaps, I would say that's fair, you are the smallest in units, but you are very deliberate in your growth choices or not choices sometimes. You've gone into living as well, in extended living. Tell us a little bit about what your rationale is, because I really like how.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and we're seeing some very similar trends. Absolutely seeing some similar trends. We're just perhaps taking a slightly different focus to respond to those trends. And we've always had the strength of being born here in Dubai and had a very large global audience and global reach in our customer database. And so we've been listening to our loyalist customers as well as our emerging growth customers to be able to identify what are they looking for, and recognizing that ultimately what they're looking for changes depending on the geography that we have a property in and the purpose of travel and who the customer is traveling with. So we've stepped back and built a sort of a brand architecture still under a monolithic structure, but focusing on more of an experience-led approach rather than just a blanket growth for growth's sake approach. And so last year we announced a couple of changes to our brand structure. That started with the launch of Jumeirah Privé, which we did last year. So if you haven't heard about Jumeirah Privé is our ultra-exclusive private collection of islands, estates and villas. We launched with our first product last year at the end of last year, and I'm hoping that we'll announce the second Privé experience very shortly.
And that's something for domestic deployment. You can deploy it internationally.
This is international predominantly, and this is very much targeting those customers who don't want a hotel experience, but they want the trust of a hotel operation. So it's a proposition that's focused entirely for a customer of one and their most loved ones, those most interesting people they want to be around, and it's built around that completely exclusive, completely private experience. We're also working on another segment which is called Jumeirah Icons. Now, many years ago, Jumeirah was really founded by the launch of Jumeirah Burj Al Arab, the world's most luxurious hotel. And we see that as a great influence to be able to take that iconic nature of a grand experience to other international locations. So we're looking at Jumeirah Icons as a very selective growth engine, very much focusing on key cities and resort destinations, but predominantly key cities. And I'm very confident that we'll make an announcement for a second Jumeirah Icon coming to the market at some point next year.
I want to pick your brain on this one because that's something I was thinking must not always be easy. I couldn't think of any place in the world where the national champion hotel operator has become so synonymous with the brand of the country itself.
Yes.
I mean, Jumeirah, for me, even long before I moved here, Dubai was Jumeirah. All the way down to the scented program, to the smell, to the sounds, to the tactile. Does that create additional pressure on you? I mean, you can't really go out and mess up the image of Dubai by having a poor product in Scotland, right? Can you?
It presents an exciting challenge. It really holds us to a very high standard.
Yeah.
Burj Al Arab was created with a very clear vision from His Highness, with a very clear purpose and intention, and we're very grateful for being provided that opportunity to take care of the guests that are welcomed at Burj Al Arab day in, day out. But it means that for us to take another Jumeirah Icon somewhere else in the world, we have to be very focused on making sure we can hold that very high standard, and we're very excited about the opportunity.
Awesome. It's very cool. Felicity, we talked a lot now about the geographies, the kind of like, I know you have a big product in extended living as well. You've probably had it for at least 10 years with your variants, but where are you evolving in this residential living space? Is that something you're going to pursue further depth, or are you going to stay closer to your core, let's say, short-term hospitality offering?
So, I mean, we have a kind of long stay brand called Hyatt House. I think statistically, actually, it's not particularly long stay in reality. But it serves a purpose and it serves a segment. I think where we're seeing the residential piece come is through branded residential. And many, many products now where we're pitching are, especially in the luxury and some of the lifestyle space, is hotel plus branded residential. And that's irrespective of geography, actually. We're seeing it in Europe. We definitely see it here. I think that whole branded residential space is going to expand, without doubt. And we like that opportunity. It brings an extra room category into inventory. To your point about multi-generational groups, people wanting to stay together, having the residences within the room inventory really diversifies how we can leverage the hotel. And I think in terms of how the branded residential is being used to then create the investment case for getting the hotel built is absolutely critical as well. So, yeah, branded residential is something that we're very committed to.
Very cool. We got about 3 minutes left over, and I really liked how this evolved into this discussion about why you're moving into certain segments that suddenly become very important. And I think, Serena, you've explained it very nicely, these segments. I'm going to steal some of that terminology. If I can just, in a semi-quick fire run, maybe also to close it up a little bit, I would like to know from each of you, to the extent, of course, that you are able to disclose, and I'm sure you have things that are even cooler you can't disclose, but what's next for you as far as a geography and as far as a segment or type of offering that you want to evolve beyond the ones we talked about? And we'll start right away again with you, Alex.
I think there's two things that I would touch on. From a segment perspective, certainly also branded residential is a large focus for us. It was almost 20 years ago that Jumeirah created the first extended stay product under Jumeirah Living. We've seen that evolve into Jumeirah Residences, which is very much an ultra-luxury product for home ownership. So expanding Jumeirah Residences is a big focus. But the other thing that we're spending a lot of time looking at right now is around the evolving customer of the future. And I think it's officially called Gen Alpha. And as a parent of two teenage daughters, I can say that I have two Gen Alpha consumers in my household who already drive 100% of our travel planning and decision making. But how they approach that through a combination of both social influence, user-generated content, and now also generative AI means the trends of what will become micro moments of influence for travel, hospitality, and tourism will evolve very quickly and probably look very different from what we think they look like today.
That's really interesting, really exciting. I just went to a week to Chongqing in China because my son saw it on an Instagram reel.
Exactly.
Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly.
By the way,
Exactly.
It was very, very exciting, so I don't regret it at all.
We are just, I think, 2 to 2.5 years away from the first Gen Alphas being able to hold their own credit cards.
Yeah.
So we're at a real moment of another pivot, I think, in the activeness of Gen Alpha and being able to drive decisions.
Cool. One segment, one geography.
I'm not going to give you one segment, one geography.
All
I'm
right.
too ready to cover.
Fine.
I think your point is a really strong one. I think that whole influence of social media, of how people make decisions now is very different. I think how AI is going to play into that is going to be very interesting as well. So I do think as an industry, we're going to see quite rapid change. And I think as an organization like Hyatt, we want to make sure that we've got clarity as to what our brands are bringing to those guests when they travel, and making sure that we're actually servicing them. So I think for us it's a big focus on data for the future.
Yeah, so I will not, comment and share the same, sort of next thing you're working on. But I think, for Ascot, we are a bit different because we actually started in the service apartment space. So residences is something that, we started. And so going into branded resi is, we're comfortable with doing that. Service apartments are comfortable, hotels are comfortable. I think what, for the next phase of our growth, we are going to look at experience-led social living. So co-living is a word that I try not to use on stage because, everyone has a very different understanding what that is. But, we are, we want to and we are in the process of pulling together a unified global take on what is experience-led social living, and creating under a life brand, and having life as the placemaker and the community generator for the locations that they're in. And I think this really becomes very interesting content because if you take a look at what travelers are looking for today, it's really having that cultural immersion, being able to meet people, solving the whole notion of loneliness, right? And creating a space where you can meet people and feel very comfortable with each other. So we are going to be the first in unifying the whole global landscape of experience-led social living. We started the brand about 5-6 years ago. We have 40 properties, and we will continue to roll that out on a global stage under Ascot.
Very cool. Say the name of the brand.
Sorry?
Say the name of the brand that you just spoke about.
Yes.
Say, what's the name of the
Life.
brand? Life.
Yes.
Very cool. So Ascot Life or Life by Ascot? Or
Life.
Life.
Yes, life.
Check it out afterwards. Last
Well,
but not least, and I see nervousness in
Yeah.
the corners already.
So I agree with all my panelists, and what I just want to add is, yes, Gen Alpha, the way people are making decisions, where people are traveling, the kind of experiences people are seeking is very critical into where next for each of our brands. And just one point I would like to add to what they've said is today's traveler, that's the Alpha and the future of traveling, is very well aware of what's happening around in the world. Therefore, travel that is culturally, socially, and environmentally sensitive is what people are going to be looking at to be associated with those kind of products, those kind of services, those kind of hotels that actually give them that kind of immersion. Where there's a sense of place where you understand where you are coming from and where you are actually enjoying that holiday. And finally, creating those lasting memories. I think people are no longer looking at hotels and residences as products, but more as an entire repertoire of experiences that they would create in their life journey. So for us, I think it is going to be to provide those kind of products and services that will cater to the needs of creating those lasting experiences while integrating your cultural and social sensibilities into everything that you do. So that's where I see is
Perfect closing words. The lasting experiences, you each do it really well, have done it really well, are going to continue to do really well. Ladies and gentlemen, they are all here this afternoon and will be very happy to engage, to explain more, and to see if there is interest in collaboration. In the meantime, please, a round of applause for my panelists, and thank you very much for your time.